welcome you all to Massachusetts, the #1 place on earth for life science. Before I had the honor and pleasure to introduce our experts from different places around the world, as well as from Boston. I just like to, again, share with you that Massachusetts is not only the #1 place for life sciences, but also the number one state in terms of innovation. We also the #1 state overall. So we do hope that you will visit Boston, visit Massachusetts often and stay long to enjoy and to experience all the wonderful things that we have to share with you. I would like to invite our panelists to come to, I guess, the podium or the chair. First is Mr. John Barrows. Mr. John is a good friend of mine. He's also the Chief Economic Development Officer for the city of Boston. If you visit Boston, if you know anything about Boston, there are a lot of good things happen, especially development around the cities, development in different neighborhoods. John is the person who make it happen. Thank you so much, John. And the second person is Annika. Annika, come on, please come on. She's the German, so my German is not that great. Okay. And another friend, Philip. Philip is he's one of the Swiss guys that we have up in Massachusetts. The reason that we are #1 is basically because of our ecosystem and our international partners, our city partners, our local city officials are our wonderful key components of our ecosystem. So if I may, Annika, if you could introduce yourself a little bit about you and about the wonderful work that you work in Boston for the Germans.
Absolutely. So the German Accelerator Life Sciences has been around for a little over a year now. So we started with the first companies in January 2016, and now it works. Okay, so we started in 2016. So I think the main, I always like to start with the vision. So the vision is to foster more entrepreneurship and innovation in the life sciences in Germany. And the way to achieve that, we think, is really to show that German companies can be successful internationally. And the best gateway for that is the US. And within the US, it's definitely Boston. And so the main thing we do is we provide strategic guidance for German life science startups, emerging companies. It's all medical innovations, so ranging from therapeutics to digital health, medical devices. And I think we had a really good first year. We worked in the first year with about 10 companies. 5 of them raised combined like $50 million, which is about a fifth of what German life science companies raised in all of 2016. We basically plug those companies into the ecosystem. We work a lot with like Mass Life Science Center, with MassBio, MassMedic, with our network to make sure that those companies can set up shop and function as like a Boston-based company basically from day one.
Thank you, Annika. And Philip is one of our friends from the Swiss Next. Is one of the most active accelerators in Boston area from the other side of the ocean. Philip, so could you also introduce yourself and the kind of work that you do?
Thank you very much for hosting us. Yes, SwissNext is the consulate of Switzerland that I was actually set up in Boston 17 years ago. And it's active for the promotion of science, technology, arts, science, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So we've been active with startups from Switzerland, with big companies, big players, investors as well. We connect the dots between Massachusetts and Switzerland, but also we have other offices in the US. One is in San Francisco, and the network has 3 other offices, one in Shanghai, one in Rio, and one in Bangalore.
Thank you. Boston, the city of Boston is our #1 partner with the state regarding how to make things happen. So John, would you also share with our friends here the wonderful work that happening in the city of Boston?
Thank you very much, Nam. It's good to be here. It's always great to represent our great state. And the mayor of Boston, Mayor Martin J. Walsh, said to me very clearly when he asked me to be the chief of economic development, he wanted Boston to be an easy place to do business. That's my job. My job is to make sure that as city government, that we're not in your way, and that as city government, we're partnering with the state, that we're partnering with our trade partners like MassBio, that we're partnering with other municipalities in the area to make the greater Boston area the best place to do business, to make Massachusetts the best place to do business. So my objective, my job as Chief Economic Development is to make sure that your companies have a great place, a soft place to land as they come to the United States or come to our region to do business. I want to also shout out our partners who are here from the region. I see Somerville, Cambridge, Quincy, Braintree, who are all part of the life science corridor along the Red Line. And as partners, we're there to make sure that the municipalities are working together and that the business scenario, the business experience is seamless. So my charge is simple, Nam. It's to make sure that Boston is a great partner to the private sector, to the public partners that we have, and that business can be conducted in an easy way.
Thank you so much, John. And I also would like to introduce to you one of the most important piece of puzzle for our life science ecosystem is the MassBio, and we fortunate to have Bob Coughlin is the head of our MassBio here. Thank you so much, Bob. And he promised that if you come to Boston next year, it will be the best bio conference ever. Right. Let me ask a quick question for our panelists. Can you share with us some of your successes that it has happened through your work over the years?
Sure, you want us to start?
Yeah, maybe lady first.
Lady first.
Well, I mean, over the years now is a great question since we haven't been around many years. As I already mentioned, our companies were very successful raising money. But also, I mean, what you said, I really like that because I mean, we like doing this in Boston and not in any other place in the US because we don't have to worry about the framework. We don't have to worry about anything. We can really focus on providing tailored strategic guidance to these companies. And everything else, there's other people to take care of it. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and that's really important. So I mean, it's hard to pick stories that are that stand out, but I think really that easy access to the community, that's really a very positive experience for all of our companies. And to give you a very soft example, one of our CEOs came over and he hadn't really done business in the US. They've been selling their device in 50 countries around the world, and they hadn't done anything in the US. And after 2 weeks in Cambridge, he walked up to me and he said, you know, I never dared to think big, and this place taught me how to think big.
Yeah, well, for example, Mass Challenge. Mass Challenge is one of the best accelerators in the country. Switzerland has only 8 million inhabitants, and where did Mass Challenge want to open a new office? Well, in Switzerland. So that's one of the success stories, I think, to bring one of the best world accelerators to Switzerland, because it's recognizing the potential of the country in terms of R&D investment. I can think also about the Bertarelli Foundation. So Ernesto Bertarelli sold Serono to Merck. And there's an ongoing partnership now between Harvard Medical School and EPFL in Switzerland. So Wyss, for example, Hans-Jörg Wyss is a Swiss entrepreneur and billionaire. He invested a lot in Massachusetts, but he also brought some money back to Switzerland and to foster the relationships between Massachusetts or R&D in general in Massachusetts and Switzerland. So it's difficult to measure good, but I think that being proactive about it and setting the right intention will ultimately bring some good projects. And if you have some smaller startups that will actually join us on programs, and we help them enter the US market. Some companies over the last years have raised money from Boston-based VCs. So I think these are some pragmatic results that have actually worked.
Yeah, so one success I'd like to talk about would be our relationship with Lyon, France, where we started an initiative called the Big Booster Initiative. And Lauren Jones, who's here, Director of Business Strategy for the City of Boston, created a team called a Global Affairs Team for Boston. And part of what we did in 2015 was sign a memorandum of understanding with Lyon. And in a partnership with Lyon, France, and Mass Challenge, we created a boot camp that was going to be at the end of their startup competition. So they start a cycle, a competition with 100 startups. They have about 400 applicants. They choose 100. And that windows down to 30 during the year. And the 100 applicants, or the 400 applicants, come from Asia, North Africa, Europe, of course, the Middle East. And then they bring 30 finalists to Boston to participate in a boot camp that is managed by Mass Challenge. And this past spring, we went after that boot camp experience in Boston, where they're connected to our ecosystem. We then traveled to Lyon, France, and Lauren represented the city of Boston and the region in announcing the finalists and giving the awards. And so Boston is tied to a larger ecosystem around the world, clearly with our partners here. But that one in specific, I think, is a good example of how we can continue to partner with other cities, with other regions across the world to open up our ecosystem and connect to their ecosystem. And then, in a way, everyone wins. And I'm really proud about that one.
Wonderful. For those of you who may not know that Boston is a part of Massachusetts, not the other way around.
Thank you, Nam.
But we are very proud of the Boston brand. Right? We are Boston. Boston strong. Anika, you have worked with a number of companies. So can you share with us what are some of the added values that the participant companies that go through your program, your help, have received or have brought to us?
Well, I mean, so for us, it's really important to have an impact. So part of how we choose companies is really to look, can we actually add a lot of value to them? Because we also have very limited capacities. And because it's such a tailored program, we will spend months and even can be years to really reach meaningful milestones with those companies. So, I mean,
it's good for them to be in Boston area, right?
Of course. And I mean, that's funny, so we get all these German delegations, like all the politicians coming, state level, federal level, and they always ask the same question. Why Boston? Why Massachusetts? By the way, we also struggle with that. Whenever we say we're in Cambridge, they're like, UK? So, but I mean, and to me, that's not a very smart question, because it's obvious. They are the best. And Germany sometimes struggles with that, because Germans always want to be the best. They're like, but we have the best car industry. Why can't we have the best biopharma sector? Like, maybe it's okay to not be the best, but you can actually work with the best, and you can benefit from that. And I mean, that's really attractive for the companies we work with. The thing is that also everyone always only thinks of like biotech when they talk about Boston, and no one knows that there's like a huge medical device cluster, for example. So it's really, if you think about how broad basically that group of companies is that we work with, how broad those segments are, I could not think of any other place in the US where it would make sense to have this accelerator.
Thank you. Philip, a question for you. SweetNex has been around for, I think, about 10 years? More than
17,
that.
yeah.
17 years. And SweetNex has been in Boston and Cambridge for a few years. Can you share with us why SweetNex has chosen Boston area to be there for a while?
So I'll join Annika on saying that if you ask me the question, it's a no-brainer. If you ask the politics back in Switzerland, they want some numbers to actually beef up that decision. That was a decision made 20 years ago because Switzerland doesn't have any natural resources, but we spend about 3.5 to 4% of the GDP in R&D. And if you look at numbers, Massachusetts spends about 6% of its GDP in R&D. So for me, it's a complete no-brainer. Plus, if you're in Cambridge, so we're a stone's throw away from Harvard Yard, In 30 minutes, you can be, by foot, you can be in Kendall Square. And then in 2 more minutes, 2 blocks away, you're at MIT. And then you find Lab Central, for example, which is just around the block. So you've got this 20, 30 minute perimeter where you actually can go and you meet the relevant stakeholders. VCs are around the corner, universities, everyone is just so close. And that's something that the diversity and the inclusion and the ecosystem is so close-knit. I think that's one of the most important things. And when they come to Cambridge, they go through Harvard, they go through Central Square, they go through MIT, and I think just the proximity helps because we're all lazy. We don't want to take the car for 3 hours to go somewhere, and if you just step out your house or your office and you meet the relevant people, for me it's a total no-brainer.
Thank you. John, I have a question for you as well. You have crisscrossed the globe to invite companies coming to Boston. You have many successes. But also, what are some of the common challenges that companies have faced and how the city of Boston has tried to solve some of them?
Sure, I think I'll talk about some challenges and maybe at the same time talk about some reasons why companies come. The city and state just joined together to welcome Qilu, which is a Chinese pharmaceutical company, to the Boston area. And that was a very exciting opportunity and a very exciting ribbon cutting because I remember the first conversation started here at Bio. And we've been talking to them for a while. And it was nice to see that come full circle. But some of the challenges, in fact, are some of the questions around immigration and the ability to bring talent from overseas and some of the uncertainty there. And so these are things that as city government and as state government, it's important for us to have a relationship with the federal government. And in Boston, in fact, we work across the aisles and we have great relationships and great collaborations. And that makes people feel good. It makes them understand that we can actually, although we're not maybe the authority on some of the immigration questions, that we can help make the connections and walk them through it. And that's what we tried to do. The other question was in the real estate market and understanding some of the price points and understanding a lot of questions around sort of whether it's too expensive. And I think having an expansive view around the area and having an expansive view around Massachusetts and what's available and being able to talk about Worcester and the opportunities there, being able to talk about some of the other cities in the greater Boston area, that we can present a diverse portfolio that allows people to be in the area but not have to pay maybe Class A dollars because they don't need a Class A building. And so I think the land, understand the land portfolio and the cost portfolio and understanding where you can go in the area to access certain price points and cost points are a really important part of what we do. And then I think the third challenge is what the governor mentioned in his speech yesterday is having stable government that works and particularly understands the role of government in the investment of infrastructure to move people around and connect people and move talent around. And so I was really excited to hear the governor's first line be the importance of spending on public infrastructure, public transit, and connecting people from different parts. It's really important. And then clearly the governor's signal once again that Massachusetts will continue to lead by the $500 million investment. It's really critical. I'm not going to mention other states and other parts of the country, but I think often I hear that the challenge of I think, Bob, you called it consistency in leadership, is something that Massachusetts continues to win on. That there is, in fact, consistency in commitment to this sector, and that there's consistency in leadership around that. And so those are some of the challenges people bring around, in understanding what the opportunities are in any state, in any region, that I think we begin to answer in those ways.
Thank you. Annika, you from Germany, right? I'm from Vietnam originally. So when you first moved to Massachusetts, when many international executives come to Massachusetts, do they face any cultural challenges that they may have to overcome?
Well, before I tell you about our companies, here's the thing. I moved to Boston Cambridge, Somerville now actually, from Berlin, and my husband moved there from Idaho. And I think he had much more of a cultural shock. That's the first thing. Then the second thing really with the German companies is that I think there's a certain danger in having this like American culture being all over the place, because you feel like you know it, you know, you watch all the movies and the TV shows and the news, and you have infinite more knowledge about that country than maybe like vice versa Americans know about Germany. On the other hand, what does that actually mean? It means that you have that false sense of, oh yeah, I know how it works. And then, I mean, I had a funny request the other day from someone in Germany who said, could you maybe teach the entrepreneurs how to do small talk with Americans? And I mean, but that's a good point. We have these people and they go into a meeting and they don't even say hello. They just start out like, bam, 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 that's what I want. Like, whoa, why don't you say hello? Or you get out of office replies saying, I will deal with your emails when I'm back. I mean, and there's really, and I mean, it's sometimes funny, but that can become problematic. Or startup CEOs saying, oh, I'm on a vacation next 3 weeks. I won't read my email. You don't get away with that in the US. It's just very different mindset. And then on the other hand, also, there's a lot of common challenges. So you look at that and you're like, the Germans, their slide decks are way too scientific. And then you talk to someone with like a local accelerator and they're like, oh yeah, these Harvard professors with their very scientific slide decks, right? I mean, I think there's more similarities when it comes to challenges that are very like life science specific than like cultural differences. And our CEO who has worked in the life sciences in Boston or in the US for like over 20 years, and I like sat back the other day and we're like, actually that whole talk about German companies, I don't know, British companies, American companies, that doesn't make any sense, because in the life sciences it's always global companies.
Thank you. Philip, you just basically come to Massachusetts not so long ago. You share what Annika just shared with us?
Well, I don't know, I'm an optimist by nature, so if I come here, in Switzerland we tend to be humble, we tend to not use big numbers when we go and talk to VCs, but actually this place has something different, is that I get excited all the time. I read Bostino and I'm like, wow, this is happening, VCs, new stories, new things happening. Every single day you can go to an event and someone will give a speech that's inspiring, that's going to be exciting. So every day, when I walk out of my home, I'm like, hey, this is going to happen. I can make things move forward, and things will actually happen. And that's maybe what Annika was also saying. It can go really quickly. Just as an example, yeah, you can shoot an email to anyone, get an answer the next day, get a meeting. 2 days later, you take the stakeholders into the office, and something happens before the end of the week. Sometimes I think in Europe people tend to be slightly slower, less responsive, and this sometimes just makes people, they tend to choose the right partners that show some interest, and that's the thing I really love about the place, is that everybody's super excited about what is happening, and for me this is great, because it makes me feel that I can do things and that things can happen and take place, and you can shoot an idea and somebody will pick it up and say, yeah, this is kind of great, let's do it. And things just happen. And in Switzerland we have few national languages, and that also sometimes is a bit of a difficulty, but when you come here, English everywhere, it's perfect. I don't know, I'm just super, I might not seem, but I'm excited the whole time.
That's very good. John, how does the city and you personally deal with this kind of excitement from international people who come to Boston? Any pointers that you can give to them?
Well, I think really the most important thing for me is being a city that continues to signal that we want people to come to Boston, that we are an open city. So I was really proud that our mayor took a stance as a city that appreciates immigrants, a city that values immigrants. It's really important. Massachusetts is a state that values immigrants. So when you heard Ann Romney earlier today talk about that history and talk about the importance of immigrants and immigrants coming to Massachusetts, to Boston, that is an important signal. It's an important part of our economy. And so to know that we have that 55% of Bostonians, in fact, are immigrants, either first generation or second generation, right? That the mayor talks about his Irish roots and his family coming here and working hard and being part of the economy in Boston. My parents coming from West Africa. And so it's an important part of our ecosystem and is not something we tolerate, but something that we value and we're welcoming. And so for me, I think that's the first message. First message as a representative of local government is that we are not only excited, but we want to make sure that this is the best experience that you could have. And that, in fact, that you continue to be excited to be in the area and be in Massachusetts and be part of our economy. Second is we'd like to throw numbers out about why it's important, right? And understand the impact of our local economy as a part of welcoming. And third, I think, as important is that we form relationships with all of the institutions or organizations that are, in fact, built as part of the infrastructure for welcoming foreign immigrant investors, investment, and talent into Massachusetts. And so that's important. I sat down with the Italian American Business Association. And one of the things they said to me is John, Boston's port is too small for our large machines. And we can only get large infrastructure construction machines through Maryland. So the first thing I did as a city of Boston is I contacted the state and urged the state to make investments. And it was right before the announcement was made in New Bedford. But we then, sort of raised our hands and said, this is important and here's why. And then we can be advocates in that way, welcoming businesses by hearing what their larger challenges are and then help government respond in a way that continues to make Massachusetts a great place for people to come in from overseas and invest.
If I may add just one thing here, I think to know that the politics are aligned with the efforts to make things move forward, this is just fantastic, because sometimes you just have the impression that things are decoupled, and in Boston and Cambridge and Massachusetts, you always have the word out, and we have the impression that, and we see that it's actually the case, everybody works with the same goal, and that's really fantastic.
Thank you. We also like this discussion to be more interactive. So if you have any question that you would like to ask our friends up in our panelists here, please feel free.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Don't have to pay for the questions. While we're waiting for some of the questions that we may have, if I may ask another question. We talk about not just today, but about the future. I think Bob or some of our speakers are talking about things happening in this field. We look forward to the future. So for the German accelerators, for SwissNext, or for the city of Boston, what will happen to your programs for the next 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years?
I mean, for us as a team, we're now really looking into working also with other countries, other European countries, but also internationally. I mean, there's so much demand. There's like smaller countries approaching us saying, hey, we really like your model, it's unique. Can we work with you? We only have maybe like 4 or 5 companies we could bring over per year, and we don't want to build that same kind of infrastructure. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And then the other thing is really that there's so much demand from local US startups to find a good path to Europe. And Germany is, in a way, the gateway to the European market. It's the biggest single market in Europe. And so we're really looking into doing that more. Right now we kind of do that as a hobby, and it's a fun hobby. But I think putting a little more structure around that would definitely add value and also foster more of these relationships that go both ways.
Phillips?
Well, if I would know what would happen in 5 years, I would make a lot of cash. But I think I joined I just arrived in May. So for me, looking what's out there and having the freedom to design maybe some of the programs I'm excited about is ultimately what I'm going to do. To continue to be perhaps to spearhead the efforts to leverage on the context that we have. I think we have to continue doing this networking. We're all here because we want to meet relevant people. About the specific efforts, I always say that I want to streamline innovation, which might seem, that's a box we don't like because innovation has to be out there. But Anika, for example, with the accelerator, is actually one of the building blocks if you want to streamline innovation. We need to have some building blocks and then look back and say, oh, this is what we built. We actually have performance indicators that are honest metrics of success and that are building a successful record of success stories. And I think that's really important. And there's a saying that I always use is, if there's smoke, there's fire. Yes, but sometimes it also means that some of the people out there have a smoke machine below the table. And I don't want to be the person with the smoke machine. I want to be like, there is something really happening, and reporting on some tangible things. I think that's one of the things we really have to do.
Thank you. John?
Yes, I think the next 5-10 years has to be about not only talent development. We have to focus on talent development, and it's great to hear the commitment of Massachusetts to continue to focus on talent development. But it's also about connections and making sure that we can connect and continue to make the ecosystem more relevant to itself and the different elements that matter. And I think talent's a big one. So someone said to me yesterday, we were having a conversation, and innovation is a contact sport, right? Innovation is about relationships and exposure to either mentors, capital, talent, ideas. And so, the reason why clustering makes sense is because you're trying to create proximity. But sometimes clustering and proximity doesn't mean you make the contacts. And so if we can make it that the German accelerator finds an easier way into this ecosystem and can connect with the elements, then we're stronger. And I feel like with an economy like in Massachusetts, like in Boston, where we're hovering about 3% unemployment rate, right? And we're trying to increase the number of people who come to our institutions. There are 55 incredible higher ed institutions around the greater Boston area, 250,000 students. How are we making sure that we're increasing the yield by connecting people more to opportunities, ideas, capital, to talent in the area? And I think we've got promise and more promise, but it's only going to be realized in the next 5 to 10 years if we can increase yield on connecting people to opportunities and making these kind of contacts work for the startups and scaling of great ideas in our ecosystem.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Annika. Thank you, Phillips. I know what happened in the future. I know that you will be in Boston next year. And I know that 5 years from now, Massachusetts still remain the innovation hub that we always been for the last 200 years. So thank you so much. And I look forward to welcome all of you to Boston a year from now. Thank you.